The SEAL instructor's smirk vanished the moment. The bullet punched through the center of the target at 800 yards. Then another, and another. 6 shots, 6 perfect holes. The teenage kid they'd been mocking for 3 days straight lowered the rifle, turned to face them, and said 5 words that would haunt that instructor for the rest of his career. Should I go for headshots now? Hey, real quick, comment your city below. I'm always amazed by how many places these stories reach. And if you're into true stories with real emotion, make sure you're subscribed. The moment 18-year-old Marcus Webb stepped off the helicopter onto the naval base in Virginia Beach, he knew he was in trouble, not because of the mission, not because of the training exercise ahead, but because of the way the Navy SEALs were looking at him, like he was a joke. Check it out, one of them muttered, loud enough for Marcus to hear. They sent us a kid. Marcus had heard it before. His entire life, people had underestimated him. At 5'7" and barely 140 pounds soaking wet, he didn't look like someone who belonged anywhere near special operations. His face was smooth, almost boyish. His voice hadn't fully deepened. And the oversized Marine Corps uniform he wore made him look like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. But Marcus Webb wasn't just any Marine. He was an attachment, a temporary assignment. The Corps had sent him here for a joint training exercise, a 2-week program designed to foster cooperation between branches. On paper, it sounded impressive. In reality, it meant Marcus would spend 14 days being hazed, mocked, and treated like a mascot by some of the most elite warriors in the world, the SEAL team's commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander James. Harding approached with the kind of swagger that came from 2 decades of confirmed kills and zero tolerance for weakness. "You're the Marine?" Harding asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer and found it hilarious. "Yes, sir. Lance Corporal Marcus Webb, sir." Harding looked him up and down like he was inspecting a defective piece of equipment. "How old are you, Lance Corporal?" 18, sir." A ripple of laughter spread through the assembled SEALs. One of them, a mountain of a man named Kozłowski, slapped his knee. 18. Christ, my son is 18. He's playing Xbox and eating Hot Pockets. This kid's supposed to train with us? Sir, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his cheeks. I'm here to learn and contribute however I can. Harding's expression didn't soften. You know what we call Marine attachments, Webb. Baggage. You're going to slow us down, get in our way, and waste our time. But orders are orders, so welcome to hell. Marcus said nothing. He'd learned long ago that responding only made things worse. That first night, Marcus was assigned a bunk in the corner of the barracks as far from the SEALs as possible. They talked loudly about him, making sure he heard every word. Think he's ever even fired a weapon. Probably cries when he stubs his toe. 2 weeks with baby face. This is going to be painful. Marcus lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, and thought about his father. Sergeant Major David Webb, a Marine Corps legend. A sniper with 87 confirmed kills across 3 deployments. A man who could thread a bullet through a keyhole at 1,000 yards in a sandstorm. A man who had died when Marcus was 12. Marcus had spent the last 6 years trying to honor his father's memory. He'd enlisted the day he turned 18, refusing to wait even a single day longer. He'd aced boot camp, though his size had made every physical challenge twice as hard. And he requested assignment to the Scout Sniper program, the same program his father had completed 30 years earlier. But Marcus hadn't told anyone about his father. He'd kept it secret, buried deep, because he didn't want anyone thinking he was riding on his father's reputation. He wanted to prove himself on his own terms, even if it killed him. The next morning began at 430 hours with a 10-mile run. Marcus kept pace with the SEALs for the first 3 miles, his lungs burning, his legs screaming. But by mile 4, he was falling behind. By mile 6, he was a quarter mile back. The SEALs didn't wait for him. They finished, showered, and were eating breakfast by the time Marcus stumbled across the finish line, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. 48 minutes, Harding announced, checking his watch. The rest of us finished in 36. You're 12 minutes behind, Webb. 12 minutes in combat means everyone's dead. Marcus nodded, too exhausted to speak. Hit the showers. We start weapons training in 20. The weapons training was worse. The SEALs ran drills with assault rifles, pistols, and shotguns, transitioning between firearms with practiced ease. Marcus held his own here, his muscle memory kicking in from months of range time back at Quantico. But the SEALs weren't impressed. Not bad, Kozłowski admitted grudgingly, for a kid. Then came the hand-to-hand combat. Marcus was paired with a SEAL named Torres, who outweighed him by at least 80 pounds. The fight lasted 7 seconds. Torres swept Marcus's legs, drove him into the mat, and pinned him before Marcus could even process what had happened. The SEALs erupted in laughter. "You good down there, babyface?" Torres asked. Grinning, Marcus tapped out, humiliation burning in his chest. Harding watched from the sidelines, arms crossed. "This is what the Marines sent us. A kid who can't run, can't fight, and probably can't shoot straight either." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Sir, I can shoot." Harding raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you can shoot. Is that right?" "Yes, sir." "Well, isn't that adorable?" Harding turned to the rest of the team. "Gentlemen, it appears our attachment has one skill. Let's see if he can back up his mouth." The SEALs cheered. This was going to be good. The shooting range was a sprawling complex with targets set at various distances: 100 yards, 300 yards, 500 yards, and 800 yards. The wind was gusting hard that afternoon, a crosswind that would make even experienced shooters struggle. Perfect conditions to humiliate a cocky teenager. Harding handed Marcus a rifle, a standard-issue M40A6, the Marine Corps' sniper weapon of choice. Marcus took it, checked the chamber, and inspected the scope with the kind of careful attention that surprised Harding, though he didn't show it. "We're going to start at 100 yards, Harding said. "Let's see if you can hit paper." Marcus nodded and took his position. He settled into a prone stance, his body relaxed, his breathing controlled. He looked through the scope, adjusted for windage, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck dead center. "Lucky shot," someone muttered. Marcus fired again. Another center hit. And again. And again. 5 shots. 5 perfect bullseyes at 100 yards. The laughter had stopped. "Not bad," Harding admitted. "Let's see how you do at 300. The 300-yard targets were smaller, harder to see. The wind was playing havoc with trajectories. The SEALs took their turns first, each one landing respectable groupings, though none were perfect. Then Marcus stepped up. He took his time, reading the wind, feeling the air currents against his skin. His father had taught him that. "The wind tells you everything," David Webb used to say. "You just have to listen." Marcus listened. He fired 6 shots. 6 holes appeared in the target, clustered so tightly they almost looked like one. Kozłowski whistled. "Okay, that's actually impressive." Harding's expression had shifted from amusement to something harder to read. Suspicion, maybe, or curiosity. 500 yards, he said. At 500 yards, the targets were barely visible to the naked eye. The SEALs fired in sequence, their shots scattering across the target. Good hits, but not extraordinary. Marcus took his position. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He thought about his father, about the countless hours they'd spent together on ranges like this, his father's patient voice guiding him. "Breathe, relax, let the rifle do the work." Marcus opened his eyes and fired. The spotter called it out. "Center mass." He fired again. "Center mass." Again. "Center mass." 6 shots. 6 perfect hits at 500 yards. The SEALs weren't laughing anymore. They were staring. Harding's jaw was tight. 800 yards. 800 yards was where most shooters failed. The distance, the wind, the curvature of the earth itself, all conspired to make accurate shooting nearly impossible. Even SEALs missed at 800 yards. Marcus walked to the firing line. His heart was pounding, but not from nerves. From something else. Something that felt like coming home. He settled into position, pressed his cheek against the stock, and looked through the scope. The target was a tiny speck in the distance, wavering in the heat shimmer. He adjusted for wind, for drop, for every variable his father had drilled into him. And then he fired. The bullet took 2 full seconds to reach the target. 2 seconds where everyone held their breath. Hit! Center mass. Marcus didn't celebrate. He simply chambered another round and fired. Hit! Center mass. Again. Hit! Center mass. He fired 6 shots in total. 6 bullets? 6 perfect hits at 800 yards in gusting crosswinds. When Marcus stood up and turned around, the silence was deafening. Harding's face had gone pale. Who the hell are you? Marcus met his eyes. Should I go for headshots now? That evening, Harding summoned Marcus to his office. The lieutenant commander sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. He gestured for Marcus to sit, which Marcus did, his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. I made some calls, Harding said quietly. Talked to your commanding officer at Quantico. Asked about you. Marcus said nothing. You know what he told me. He said you're the best natural shooter he's seen in 20 years. He said you qualified for Scout Sniper School on your first try, which almost never happens. He said you broke every range record at Quantico. Harding leaned forward. And then I dug deeper. I found something interesting. Your father was David Webb, Sergeant Major David Webb. Marcus's throat tightened. One of the greatest Marine snipers in history, Harding continued. A legend. And you're his son. Yes, sir. Why didn't you tell us? Marcus took a breath. Because I didn't want anyone to think I'm here because of him. I wanted to prove I belong on my own. Harding studied him for a long moment. Then, to Marcus's surprise, the hard edges in his expression softened. You know, your father and I served together. Briefly, back in 2006, Iraq. He saved my life during a firefight in Fallujah. Took out 3 insurgents who had us pinned down. Marcus's eyes widened. I didn't know that. He never talked about it. That's the kind of man he was. Harding stood and walked around the desk. You have his gift, Marcus. That much is clear. But you also have something he didn't have at your age. What's that, sir? Humility. Your father was an arrogant son of a bitch when he was 18. Thought he was invincible. You, on the other hand, you've been taking our abuse for 3 days without complaint. That takes strength. Marcus didn't know what to say. Harding extended his hand. I was wrong about you. We all were. I'm sorry. Marcus shook his hand, the weight of those words settling over him. Starting tomorrow, Harding said, you're not an attachment anymore. You're part of the team. The next 10 days transformed Marcus's experience. The SEALs stopped mocking him and started learning from him. He taught them techniques his father had passed down, tricks for reading wind and compensating for elevation. In return, they taught him their methods, close quarters combat, underwater operations, advanced tactical movements. Marcus trained harder than he'd ever trained in his life. He ran faster, fought smarter, pushed his body to its absolute limits. And slowly, the gap between him and the SEALs began to close. But Marcus still couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Some test he hadn't faced yet. On the 11th day, Harding gathered the team for a briefing. Gentlemen, he said, we have a situation. This was supposed to be a training exercise, but command has authorized us to conduct a live operation. The room went silent. Intelligence has located a high-value target in the Appalachian Mountains. A domestic terrorist named Randall Voss, former Army Ranger turned extremist. He's been coordinating attacks on federal buildings and has evaded capture for 6 months. Local law enforcement can't touch him. He's holed up in a fortified compound with at least a dozen armed followers. Harding pulled up a satellite image on the screen. Our mission is to infiltrate the compound, neutralize Voss, and extract any intelligence we can find. It's a 12-hour operation. We leave at 0400. Marcus's heart raced. A live operation. His first real mission. Webb, Harding said, looking directly at him. You're coming with us. But you'll be in a support role. Overwatch. You'll be positioned on a ridge 1,200 yards from the compound. Your job is to provide cover fire if things go sideways. Yes, sir. That night, Marcus barely slept. He checked his rifle a dozen times, ran through mental calculations, visualized every possible scenario. This was what he trained for, what his father had prepared him for, but he was terrified. The insertion went smoothly. The team hiked 6 miles through dense forest in complete darkness, moving like ghosts. Marcus struggled to keep up, his legs burning, but he refused to fall behind. When they reached the staging area, Harding sent Marcus up to his position on the ridge while the rest of the team moved toward the compound. Marcus climbed for 20 minutes, his rifle strapped to his back, until he reached a rocky outcrop with a clear line of sight to the target. He set up his rifle, adjusted the scope, and settled into position. Below, the compound was dark. A collection of crude buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence. Guard towers at each corner. Armed men patrolling the perimeter. Marcus's radio crackled. Overwatch. This is Alpha. In position. Stand by. Copy, Alpha. The SEALs moved with precision, cutting through the fence, neutralizing guards with silenced weapons. Everything was going according to plan. Until it wasn't. Gunfire erupted from inside the compound. The sound was deafening, even from 1,200 yards away. Contact! Contact! We're compromised! Kozłowski's voice screamed over the radio. Marcus's blood ran cold. Overwatch! We need suppressing fire on the west tower. Now, Marcus swung his rifle toward the west tower. A man with a rifle was leaning out, firing down at the SEALs. Marcus calculated the distance, the wind, the angle. He fired. The man in the tower collapsed. Good hit! Keep it up! More targets appeared. Marcus fired again and again, each shot finding its mark. He moved through his magazine with mechanical precision, years of training taking over. But then he saw something that made his heart stop. A man emerged from the main building. Tall, bearded, carrying a rifle. Randall Voss, the high-value target, and he was dragging someone with him, a hostage. Alpha, be advised, Marcus said into the radio. Voss has a hostage, female, civilian. Copy. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. We need him alive. Marcus watched through his scope as Voss used the woman as a shield, backing toward a vehicle. If he reached it, he'd escape. The mission would be a failure. Worse, the woman would die. Marcus's mind raced. The distance was 1,200 yards. Voss was moving. The hostage was in front of him. And Marcus only had one shot. His father's voice echoed in his head. Sometimes, son, you have to take the shot nobody else will take. And you have to live with the consequences. Marcus's hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. He centered the crosshairs on Voss's head. The man's skull was visible just above the hostage's shoulder. A target area the size of an orange ad. 1,200 yards. Impossible. Unless you were David Webb's son, Marcus. Exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The bullet traveled for 3 full seconds. In that time, Marcus watched Voss take another step. He watched the hostage struggle. He watched his entire career, his father's legacy, everything he'd worked for, hang in the balance. The bullet struck Randall Voss in the temple, punching through his skull and dropping him instantly. The hostage collapsed to the ground. Alive. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Kozłowski's voice came over the radio. Holy Mother of God, did you just make that shot? Hostage is secure, Marcus replied, his voice shaking. Target is down. The SEALs reached the hostage within seconds, pulling her to safety. Harding's voice crackled through. Overwatch, that was the greatest shot I've ever seen in my life. You just saved this mission and that woman's life. Marcus didn't respond. He was shaking too hard to speak. The extraction went smoothly. The team recovered Voss's body, seized computers and documents from the compound, and hiked back to the extraction point. By dawn, they were back at the base. When Marcus climbed off the helicopter, his legs nearly gave out. Harding caught him, steadying him. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, though tears were streaming down his face. "It's okay," Harding said quietly. "First kill is always the hardest, even when it's righteous." But Marcus wasn't crying because of the kill. He was crying because, for the first time since his father had died, he felt like he'd done something that would have made David Webb proud. 3 days later, Marcus was summoned to Harding's office again. When he entered, he found not only Harding, but also a Marine Corps colonel he didn't recognize. The colonel was holding a folder. "Sit down, Lance Corporal," the colonel said. Marcus sat, his stomach churning. The colonel opened the folder. "Your performance during the operation has been reviewed by senior leadership. Your shot, the 1,200-yard headshot with a hostage in play, has been analyzed by ballistics experts. They're calling it one of the finest shots in the history of U.S. military sniper operations." Marcus blinked. "Sir, I just did my job. You did more than that." The colonel leaned forward. "The Marine Corps is recommending you for immediate advancement in the Scout Sniper program. You'll be fast-tracked through training and assigned to an operational unit within 6 months." Marcus's heart soared. This was everything he dreamed of. But the colonel wasn't finished. "However, there's something else you need to know. Something about your father." Marcus's blood went cold. "Sir?" The colonel pulled out another document. "During our investigation, we reviewed your father's service record, specifically his final mission, the one where he died." Marcus's hands gripped the armrest of his chair. "Your father was killed in Afghanistan 12 years ago during a reconnaissance mission. Official reports stated he was killed by enemy fire. But classified documents we've recently reviewed tell a different story." The room seemed to tilt. "Your father wasn't killed by the enemy, Marcus. He was killed by one of his own men. A negligent discharge during a firefight. A Marine under his command panicked, fired without looking, and shot your father in the back." Marcus couldn't breathe. "The Marine Corps covered it up," the colonel continued. "They didn't want the family to know. They thought it would be easier if you believed he died a hero's death in combat." Tears blurred Marcus's vision. "Who was it? Who killed him?" The colonel hesitated. "The Marine in question was discharged shortly after. He's a civilian now. His name is sealed in classified records. I want to know. That information is not available to you." Marcus stood, his voice rising. "That's my father. I have a right to know." Harding stepped forward, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, listen to me. Your father was a hero. The way he died doesn't change that. And you've proven you're his son. You've honored his legacy in every way that matters." But Marcus barely heard him. His mind was reeling. Everything he believed about his father's death was a lie. The colonel stood. "I understand this is difficult. Take some time to process it. But don't let this derail your career. You have a bright future ahead of you." The colonel left. Harding stayed. "I'm sorry, kid," Harding said quietly. Marcus wiped his eyes. "Did you know?" "No, I swear to you, I didn't." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Marcus spent the next week in a haze. He trained mechanically, going through the motions, but his heart wasn't in it. The anger and betrayal gnawed at him constantly. His father hadn't died in a blaze of glory. He'd been shot in the back by a scared kid who didn't know what he was doing, and the Marine Corps had lied about it. On the final day of the training exercise, Harding pulled Marcus aside. "You've been quiet," Harding said. "I'm fine." "Sir, no, you're not." Harding sat down on a bench, gesturing for Marcus to join him. "Look, I get it. You're angry. You feel betrayed. And you have every right to be." Marcus said nothing. But here's the thing, Harding continued. Your father's death doesn't define him. His life does. The missions he completed, the men he saved, the legacy he left behind. And now you're carrying that legacy forward. How am I supposed to do that when everything I believed was a lie? Harding looked at him. By choosing to be better. By choosing to honor him not because of how he died, but because of how he lived. Marcus stared at the ground. What if I can't? Then you let the anger consume you, and you waste the gifts he gave you. Or you take the shot nobody else will take, just like you did on that ridge. You decide what kind of man you want to be. The words settled over Marcus like a wake. That night, Marcus returned to the shooting range alone. He set up targets at 800 yards. Then 1,000. Then 1,200. And he fired. Again and again and again, until his hands were raw and his vision was blurred with exhaustion. But with every shot, he felt the anger loosening its grip. By the time the sun rose, Marcus had made his decision. 2 years later, Marcus Webb stood on a different ridge in a different country. He was no longer a lance corporal. He was now a sergeant, a fully qualified scout sniper, assigned to a Marine Special Operations unit. He completed 12 missions, earned commendations, and built a reputation as one of the finest shooters in the Corps. But he still thought about his father every day, and he still didn't know who had killed him. Maybe he never would. But Marcus had learned something his father never got the chance to teach him. That legacy wasn't about how you died. It was about how you lived. It was about the choices you made when everything was on the line. On this particular morning, Marcus was providing overwatch for a hostage rescue operation in Syria. The target was an ISIS commander holding 3 aid workers captive. The situation was nearly identical to the mission 2 years earlier. A hostage, a moving target, an impossible shot. Marcus lined up the crosshairs, his breathing steady, his hands calm, and he thought about the 8-year-old kid who'd been mocked by SEALs, who'd proven himself with 6 perfect shots, who'd taken the shot nobody else would take. That kid had grown up, but he hadn't forgotten who he was or where he came from. Marcus exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew true and halfway around the world, in a cemetery in North Carolina. A headstone bore the name Sergeant Major David Webb, along with an inscription: a father, a Marine, a legend. Beneath it, someone had recently added a small plaque. It read, "His son carries the torch." Marcus never saw the plaque, but somehow he knew it was there. And that was enough. That's the end of today's story, but I hope it stays with you for a while. If something in it spoke to you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share your thoughts. It's your comments that keep me inspired to make the next one.